You're watching UATV News. My name is Ina Kosinska. Good evening. NATO will not compromise with Russia on Ukraine's membership in the alliance. This was stated by Secretary Danilov of the organization, Jens Stoltenberg, during the joint press conference with Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic Integration of Ukraine, Olga Stefanishyna. NATO-Ukraine Commission meeting has taken place in Brussels today. The main topic of the talks was the build-up of Russian troops on the borders of Ukraine.
First of all, that we continue to provide support to Ukraine. Political support for Ukraine's territorial integrity, sovereignty, but also practical support with our comprehensive assistance package, with different trust funds, with different activities conducted by the NATO office in Kiev, where we help to implement reforms, help to modernize Ukraine's armed forces. And I always encourage allies to step up and also provide more support within the NATO framework.
My intention is to bring the ultimate clarity to all allies about the security situation in the region and over Ukrainian borders, including implementation of the Minsk and Normandy arrangements. We should all realize that Russia's demands to allies could not be considered as a negotiating position. Aggressor is not in a position to put conditions until the Russian tanks is out of Ukrainian border. We see as Russia attempts to shift the discussion by threatening with the new war without moving any step forward peaceful settlement within Minsk and Normandy formats.
The U.S.-Russia security talks kicked off in Geneva. The United States delegation is headed by the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Sherman. The Russian side delegate is Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation Sergei Ryabkov and Deputy Defense Minister Alexander Fomin. After today's talks on January 12, a meeting of the Russia-NATO Council is scheduled in Brussels, and on January 13, the permanent representatives of the OSCE countries in Vienna. Our special correspondent for Europe, Vitaly Sizov, is also in Geneva, Switzerland. He will tell you the details.
Я нахожусь возле представительства США при ООН в Женеве.
We are now near the office of the United States Mission to the United Nations in Geneva. Here, behind the closed doors, the week of intense talks started regarding the issue of the troops drawdown and the European strategic security. Today's meeting is held in US-Russia bilateral format. As a reminder, last month Russian authorities demanded the so-called guarantees from the United States on the non-expansion of the NATO, threatening military escalation. All this happened amid the military build-up on the Ukrainian borders. To put it short, now the Russian side uses the Cold War period rhetoric. Before the talks started, many analysts noted that Russian President Vladimir Putin actually pursues the restitution of the post-Second World War security map, when it was divided into spheres of influence by the US, the UK and USSR during Yalta Conference. The United States' stand is different. It states that the situation in the world have changed since that time, and all approaches are no more working, that all parts must be heard, and there is no decision on the partners' side without their representation in the talks, and at present negotiations may concern only the context of the bilateral relations and not the issue of the Europe's security. European security is a key agenda of another round of talks to be held in Brussels on the 12th of January. Now we receive ambiguous signals on what is going there. The Russian side pretends to show that the meeting turned decisive in global aspect. There were some statements by the Deputy Minister of the Foreign Affairs Lavrov that allegedly the process is on the right track and the result can be promising. From the other hand, there are moderate comments from the US representatives stressing that these talks consider bilateral issues alone. Reported by Vitaly Sizov and Nick Starkov for UATV News.
The United States of America will not discuss European security with Russia without European allies and partners. This was stated by U.S. Deputy Secretary of State Sherman following a meeting with representatives of the Russian delegation the day before. The corresponding statement was published on the website of the U.S. Department of State. The negotiations lasted a bit more than 2 hours.
The Deputy Secretary stressed the United States' commitment to the international principles of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the freedom of sovereign nations to choose their own alliances. The Deputy Secretary affirmed that the United States would welcome genuine progress through diplomacy. The United States will discuss certain bilateral issues with Russia at the Strategic Stability Dialogue, but will not discuss European security without our European allies and partners. From the readout by the U.S. Department of State spokesperson Ned Price on the website of the U.S. Department of State.
A Normandy Four meeting can take place in the coming weeks. It was initiated by France and Germany. The main topic will be the search for ways to resolve the situation on the border of Ukraine and Russia. After all, this is important for the entire architecture of European security, French President Emmanuel Macron underlined. He added that one of the priorities of the French presidency of the EU Council will be the completion of work on the strategic compass of the European Union, which would prioritize the development of common European capabilities in the field of security and defense. To remind, last time leaders of the Normandy Four held a meeting via video conference was in November of 2020.
We will offer our common view on the architecture of European security, and we are already doing this in the current situation, for example, in the case of Ukraine. This is the Normandy format. Me and Chancellor Scholz proposed to hold another meeting in the coming weeks. The geopolitical situation in the region requires Europe and the EU to offer their vision, act and sit at the negotiating table with all the participants in order to move forward in those key directions.
33 Ukrainians came back from Kazakhstan to Ukraine late in the evening the day before. It was a regular flight from Nur-Sultan to Kyiv. The next flights from the capital of Kazakhstan are scheduled for January 13th and 16th. As stated by the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, all Ukrainians in Kazakhstan are safe and provided with temporary housing. Our citizens are not among those killed, injured or detained during the mass protests. In the meantime, passengers who arrived yesterday said that now it is calm at the Nur-Sultan airport. Domestic flights have not yet been resumed, but international flights are on schedule.
People from Almaty cannot fly from there, because first of all the city was closed, the foreign military, and there now. The internet does not work well, that's all. I arrived from the city of Karaganda. Everything is very quiet in our city. The plane was full of people. When we departed from Nur-Sultan, yes, there were soldiers there. There are checkpoints in between cities and people are being checked.
The catastrophe of the Ukraine International Airlines jet in Tehran is a terrorist attack against civilian aviation. Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Secretary Danilov, stated this in air for the Voice of America. On the eve, Ukraine marked the second anniversary of the tragedy. The passenger flight with 176 people on board was shot down with rocket launched by the Iranian military. All passengers and crew members died. Countries which lost citizens in the catastrophe still seek justice and compensation from Iran. See more in the following report.
For all his life, he was in love with sky. This is how mother Volodymyr Haponenko, captain of the plane shot down over Tehran, speaks about her son. Since childhood, the man wanted to become a pilot.
He
He used to love to get over the flat sheet, wavering with it as wings and saying, "I'm flying, I'm flying." He was 3 years old. This is how he loved his profession. He couldn't live without it.
Volodymyr Haponenko was an experienced pilot. He had spent more than 10,000 hours in the sky. By the time of the tragedy, he was 50 years old. His family seeks fair punishment for those responsible for his death. In total, 167 passengers died in the crash. Among them are citizens of Iran, Canada, Afghanistan, Sweden, the United Kingdom and Ukraine. All 9 crew members were pilots and flight attendants of Ukraine International Airlines. The remembrance ceremony of the victims of the disaster was held in Kyiv.
Years do not make it easier, neither for the relatives of the victims nor for friends nor in the company. This is a day of condolences to all the relatives of the victims.
On the 8th of January 2020, the Ukrainian International Airlines Boeing 737-800 passenger plane departed from Tehran to Kyiv. It crashed immediately after takeoff. Initially, Iran rejected any involvement in the tragedy. Only 3 days later, the military admitted that the plane was shot down by their rocket, allegedly by accident. But yet for 2 years, the Iranian authorities have been blocking access to information about the incident.
The Iranian side does not provide us with key evidence, which could easily provide us the entire chain of events. Namely, we claim the records from the combat vehicle, which had shot the jet a key evidence. Moreover, after the decryption of the flight recorders, the Iranian side did not hand over Ukraine the record of the vocal information.
Moreover, Iranian authorities refused to cooperate with the International Victim Coordination and Assistance Group. The following statement was posted on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Despite our best efforts over the past 2 years and multiple attempts to resolve this matter through negotiations, the coordination group has determined that further attempts to negotiate with Iran on reparations for the destruction of flight PS-752 at this time are futile. The coordination group will now focus on subsequent actions to take to resolve this matter in accordance with international law. From the statement by the International Coordination Response Group for the Victims of Flight PS-752 on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
Although Iran took full responsibility for the downing, it still has to pay a victim's settlement. The Ukrainian side in the negotiations believes that it is important to discover who delivered the order to launch the rocket and to prove that it was not an accident but a conditioned terrorist attack.
Наша задача – доказать вину.
Our task is to prove the guilt and intent of the Iranian side, because you can't just hit the button. This is a deliberate action that the commander of the anti-missile complex has no right to make by his own decision. The Iranian side will undoubtedly follow its own interests. For them it is unprofitable that the whole world would know the truth.
Official Tehran declares they are ready to conduct bilateral negotiations separately with each country. Reported by Nick Starkov, Yulia Krychkova, UATV News.
A fine of 65,000 hryvnias, that is almost $2,500 for discrimination. In Ukraine, employers who indicate the gender and age of applicants in their vacancies will be penalized. On January 8th, amendments to the law on advertising regarding gender discrimination came into force. According to them, employers cannot offer work only for women or only for men representatives of a particular race or demand certain religious or political views. Now, for non-compliance with this norm, employers will have to pay a fine of 10 times the minimum wage. The State Labor Service will fine violators. I believe that now there will be a greater burden on recruiters since they themselves will meet out the candidates who are not suitable for them. On the other hand, I believe that the problem of ageism, the problem of sexism cannot be resolved by such measures that are prohibitive measures. Of course, it is necessary to work with public opinion. Sumy region was transferred to the orange quarantine zone. Now there are 2 such regions in Ukraine. The orange level was also introduced in the Kherson region. The rest of the regions remain in the yellow zone. Over the past day, almost 2,000 new cases of COVID-19 were registered in Ukraine. 86 people died of complications. Most of all new cases are in Kyiv and in the Kharkiv region. The best traditions of Ukrainian carpet, specific traits of Ukrainian Baroque, modern subjects, and plenty of colors and emotions. All this is about the personal exhibition of tapestries called Reflections by artist Olga Pilukhina. The exposition of 46 such carpets is based on the idea of the tree of life, which grows from time immemorial to the present. Our correspondents attended the exhibition at the Museum of Kyiv History.
Olga Pilukhina learned the ancient craftsmanship of making tapestries from her parents. Today, the artist from Poltava region is the author of more than 100 of those carpets. They are made using a long-standing technique of double-side smooth hand-weaving with natural lambswool threads. It takes from several months to several years to create one.
This is a material very deep, very warm and very rich in texture. One can always find something new in traditional technology and combine different techniques, smooth and three-dimensional, combine different threads, smooth, fluffy, painted, unpainted, and create such a man-made miracle.
Subjects of such carpets vary. Nature, still lifes, portraits, national holidays. The most labor-intensive are ornamental tapestries.
Olga Pilukhina
is the author of a series of monumental ornamental tapestries, Carpet Ukraine. This tapestry is called Star Tapestry. It was recognized as the best of 2018. It has more than 300 shades of blue.
This is the 18th solo exhibition of Olga Pilukhina. Halina is one of the fans of her work. She attended the artist's exhibition 2 years ago, and now she came with her friends.
All works evoke a feeling of warmth, joy and peace. I can't say that one is better, another is worse. All of her works eliminate positive energy.
The artist has been creating the tapestries presented at the exhibition since 2009. Each one has its own story. For example, the series Fragrances appeared when the author got one of the characteristic symptoms of coronavirus, loss of scent.
I wanted to show those smells through shapes, through lines, through color harmonies, so that they could be seen. Here are the evening redolence, honey air, aroma of the sea and fragrant wind.
At the end of her exhibition at the Museum of Kiev History, the artist conducted an author's excursion for visitors, reported by Nick Starkov and Olena Diduch, UATV News.
That's all for this hour. More updates on our official website, YouTube, Twitter and Facebook pages. Thank you for staying with the UATV channel. See you tomorrow. Goodbye.